Hello everyone, my name is Kayla, or otherwise South Dakota Ghost Girl on YouTube. So the reason I started this channel was I have spent a long time debating on whether or not I wanted to share my stories, my family stories, as myself and many of my family members grew up believing in the paranormal world and have had multiple experiences dealing with the paranormal, some scary, no, some not so scary. Um, and I think it's just something I've been debating on and whether or not I should share. And I finally decided, you know what, I'm going to go forward and do it. See if there's an audience that would like to listen to our stories. I also have a missing aunt here in South Dakota that I would like to take some time to share her story if people are interested. And of course, talk to my other aunts and see if they'd want to come on and talk about her story. Because I think the more we're willing to share, the more likely it is we'll find out more about her. It's been many years. And just to take some time to talk about some things that have happened in my life and my family's lives and bring them on and see if people would like to listen to that kind of stuff. I don't have a really cool background right now. I'm just recording in my living room. This is just my first video. I want to see what people think and whether or not there is an interest in, like I said, our story. And I apologize if this is kind of long. It's just my introduction and I don't know really where to start. So if anyone has any pointers, tips, tricks, let me know. If this does blow up a little bit more, I will plan on expanding and getting different software and whatnot. But for now, I'm not going to, just because I don't know if this is going to go anywhere. But even if there's a couple people that are interested, I'll keep sharing. So where I'd like to start today is I'll start by sharing two of my stories. I have so many other stories. So I grew up, I didn't always believe in the paranormal. I spent my young childhood with three boys, my brother and two of my cousins. We spent a lot of time watching ghost videos because that was the cool thing to do back in middle school in the early 2000s. And a lot of times we would think, this is so fake. We would laugh about it. And I remember one day talking to my dad as I was sitting at the counter eating, and I was like, oh, these videos are so fake. They're so funny. Ghosts aren't real. And my dad stopped and looked at me and he's like, they are real. And the more willing you are to listen and be open-minded, you might be more likely to experience something yourself. And that's where I found out my dad had an experience and had multiple experiences with the paranormal. And in fact, one of the experiences, the spirit looked just like me. And so if there's interest, I'll bring my dad on, kind of have him talk about his experience with that. But the first experience I really want to talk about was here in the town I grew up in and I currently live in. There's an area that has been known to be haunted for many, many years. The home burnt down. It's now a cow pasture. Cattle roam around on there. So I try to think of things as scientifically as possible. And so I try to, when we would go out to this location, I always try to think, is this correlated to the cows? Is there something more to the story than that? I apologize if you hear some shaking. My washer's going off right now and it's freaking out. But the location there, I have multiple stories of what happened there. But in order to fully discuss it, I do believe I would like to bring on my brother and my cousins that also were there to talk about their experiences, as their experiences do get a lot creepier than mine does. The one that one experience I want to talk about from this location that happened to me was, I believe it was about a couple years ago. I don't know exact year, whatnot, but we went to this location, hopped over the gate, whatnot, and I was walking around with my friend, my one cousin Taylor, my brother Zach. I believe there's another individual, but I don't remember who exactly. But we were walking around, recording like we always do, and being stupid idiots. But I remember I felt like I was being watched the whole time, and it was just this really eerie feeling. It felt like from behind me, because I was mainly facing towards the center of the cow pastures. I was talking to my friend. My friend doesn't believe in the paranormal, but she was pretty freaked out. She didn't like the environment. She said there was just something off about it. But I remember just feeling like I was stared at constantly, and I apologize if I keep repeating myself. It's one of those things that I'm going to keep working on. But when I sat there and at one time I just felt like I needed to turn around. I needed to see what was going on. And I ended up turning towards the old location of the house, which is now just a foundation. and I seen a woman in white, and she was in this long white gown, and I honestly don't know what era it would have been. All I could see was this long white gown and a woman in pure white, looking at me, and she ended up walking away. And I don't feel like she was evil, but it felt eerie, and I couldn't get my eyes off of her, and she just kind of floated away off into the right of the direction that I was looking at. And to me, it was just creepy because I was like, I have been to this location multiple times. I've had weird things happen there, but I have not seen a full body apparition before. So it was one of those things where I was worried about, is this going to come home with me? What did I just see? And I'm like sitting here trying to rationalize everything. Like, did I truly see something? What is going on in my brain? It's one of those things that I still to this day cannot fully explain, and I probably will never be able to fully explain. And it's just one of those things where I'm glad that nothing followed me. I, think whatever's out there to this day that I'm safe. As the location has been known back in when my parents were in high school, it was known for satanic rituals, animal sacrifices, whatnot. And I understand, like, during that time it was a satanic panic, so a lot of things that I hear about, like, satanic rituals and all that, I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. But there were things caught out there. I've talked to multiple family members that have been out there, older adults than myself that have been out there, and their experiences, what they've seen back when they were in high school in the 90s. So it's one of those things that I do want to take more time to explain what I've seen out there, what my family's seen out there, but I think it's one of those things I have to have my family here to be able to share the full experience of what has happened, as there's been some really frightening things that have taken place out there, and very eerie things. I do think some of this stuff is more evil. Granted, I am not a religious person by any means, but I do believe there is certain evil out there. And I have felt it, my family has felt it, family friends have felt it, and that's where I'll take time to have them come on and talk about their experiences. And maybe some people have some insight too of maybe what could have taken place, or what we could have seen, and maybe see if there's more interest in what took place out there. So that's the main thing I want to share from out there. Just a little tidbit of what's taken place. We've been out there more than a handful of times, and the other stories are much, much more frightening than that one. The lady in white wasn't frightening. Like I said, I didn't feel anything evil from her. And I hope maybe others have experienced similar things. And maybe once I start explaining more of the stories, if there is an interest, see if there's some more rationalization, or maybe see if this is a repeated thing that happens. But because people have died on the location from what I'm aware, but nothing tragic happened. Very good people from what I have been told. And just one of those things that did something go wrong with people being dumb out there, being stupid children or whatnot? So the other story I want to share was when I was younger. When I say I was in my early teens, but I grew up in a rural town, and my mom and her ex-boyfriend of the time lived out in this area, and we first lived out on a farm. And growing up on this farm, it was a beautiful farm. Our closest neighbor was a couple miles away. There were cows, horses, we had chickens, everything you could think of on a farm. It was a dream come true to me. But the house itself wasn't bad. It was safe. I enjoyed growing up there, but one thing that I noticed a lot, and so did my younger brother, was in the middle of the night. It would usually start about 1 o'clock in the morning, where my brother and I's rooms were upstairs. And first, when you walked upstairs, to your right was like a kid's living room, left was a bathroom. And if you kept walking forward, you ran into my room. But if you took a left, you ran into my brother's room. And in between my room and my brother's was an attic. And every night about 1 o'clock in the morning, I would start hearing steps, all the way starting from the bottom of the steps, and they'd work its way up to the top of the steps. And it'd walk towards my room, and it would stop. And then it would walk towards my brother's room and stop. And then it would turn around and go up the attic stairs. And it would do that every night. And it would sometimes repeat itself, but usually it would stop by 3 o'clock in the morning. And I remember many times my brother waking up, and he would come in my room after the first time it would stop, and he would freak out and ask me, did you hear this? And many times I'd be like, yeah, I heard it. And to this day, I haven't really talked to him a whole lot about it. I don't know how much of it he remembered. He was fairly young. And I remember this just being a repeated thing that would happen in the house time and time again. And we had dogs, but they generally slept downstairs. The one couple times I can remember when they heard it, they would usually hide with us. But I never remember seeing anything. It was always just hearing steps. And when I first would hear it, I was like, well, it's a little bit older of a house. Is it just natural creaking? And the more I kept listening to it every night, it was a repeated thing. It would happen every night, and it wouldn't just be a couple creaks. It'd be the full set of stairs up to my room, then to my brother's room, then up the attic. So to me, I always wondered, what was going on? Did someone die in the house? But again, nothing that I felt was evil. It was just weird hearing it, and I didn't really know how to explain it. Growing up, I never really told my mom and her boyfriend because I thought, they're going to think I'm crazy. I'm a kid. Who's going to believe me? It's just one of those things that, I guess I just dealt with. And so did my younger brother. Many times he'd come in my room and stay in there. But the other story I want to share that took place in this small town was we ended up moving into town. And the town itself has maybe population. I think it's about 200, 300 people, and it's decreasing. So we lived on the outskirts of town, and it looked like a newly modeled house. It was really nice. To me, it was nice, but there were weird things that would happen in the house. I sometimes felt like I was being watched. The basement, our dogs were not crazy about going into the basement, and I never really understood why. I would try to get them to go downstairs with me, and they would freak out. And other times they'd be just fine with going downstairs. It would be just spur of the moment things. There were sometimes I'd call them downstairs with me and they'd absolutely refuse. And other times they were perfectly fine with going down there. So it could have been just a dog thing. I don't know, but it was eerie to me. But one time I remember my brother was outside of the house. My mom was at work, so was her boyfriend. Summertime, I was home from school on summer break. And I was in my room. So when you walked into this house, you first walked into the kitchen. And if you kept walking straight, it was the living room. Take a right. There's a mini hallway. To the left was my room. To the right of me was my brother's room. But at the other end of the hallway was a bathroom. But if you took a left before the bathroom, it was my mom and her ex-boyfriend's room. But one day, I was in my room. I was rearranging my dresser. I love rearranging things. It's just one of those things I really enjoy. I love cleaning. Can't really tell from my house. It's kind of a disaster right now. But I remember I was rearranging my dresser. I was standing in my bedroom just rearranging. And I felt this weird feeling like I was being watched. And I want to say I was like 12, 13 around that time. And I knew no one was in the house. So it was just odd. So I thought, did someone sneak into the house? And I remember I didn't feel scared. That was one feeling that still surprises me to this day, is that I didn't feel scared. But I remember turning around and there was a little girl in a blue Victorian dress, and she looked about maybe 4 to 6 years old, and she was just staring at me. And I just felt this odd, overwhelming feeling to follow her. And she stood there for a while, and I started walking out, and I don't want to say ran, she more so floated into my mom and ex-boyfriend's room. And there's a wall that kind of cuts off, so I wasn't able to really see where she was fully going. But I ended up following her, and as I was following her and I turned, she disappeared. But my dogs were all whining. They were freaking out. And there was no way she could have escaped, because, there's a sliding glass door in there, but I did not hear it open, and when I walked in, it was locked. So there's no way she could have escaped. I looked all over the bedroom. I looked all over the laundry room that's in between there, and there was nothing. And I can't really rationalize it because my dogs were freaking out. They were whining. They seemed scared. But in the back of my mind, I always hear all these, as I got older anyways, all these ghost stories that I would hear. People would feel scared or feel overwhelmed or just in general have so many mixed emotions. And all I remember feeling was this intense feeling of having to follow her. And that was about it. I didn't feel scared or anything. I felt weird after she disappeared. I was worried that something happened to her. And the weird thing was she was a full apparition. I couldn't see. I don't remember being able to see through her, but I do remember seeing the full girl. And I don't really know why I've seen a little girl in a blue Victorian dress, because it's rural South Dakota. I can't imagine. I mean, I'm assuming people probably dressed in some Victorian style, but it's again one of the rural areas. Most people dressed in, plain clothing. They didn't have the nicest of clothing because money was spent on farming. So that's one thing that always kind of boggles my mind. And I haven't taken any time to really look into the history because it's one of those things that I don't really know how to explain. I did see her one other time though. I was in the kitchen this time, and again, it was in the summertime. Mom and her boyfriend were out working. My brother was outside playing with friends, and I was waiting for my friend to come home. So I was in the kitchen. I was making a pizza for my brother and I. And I remember walking to the living room because I was watching TV. And I felt like I was being watched. And as I turned around, the little girl was back, same outfit. Again, I went from being fine to this intense feeling of having to follow her again. And as I started walking towards her, she turned around and walked to the basement. Or floated. There really were no legs. All I could see was her dress, but it just seemed like she moved quite quickly. And when I followed to the basement, again, she was gone. And it's a long set of steps. By the time I had turned, there's no way she could have been gone, but she was gone. And I still don't know how to explain why I kept seeing this little girl. And I don't know if something happened to her or if it's just one of those things. Is it a random apparition? Is it my imagination? I don't know what to say other than I knew what I saw, and it's just the emotions I felt at that time were really interesting. So that's primarily what took place in those areas. And I do have a lot of other stories to share. I wish I do have a location that we did try and get a recording at. Actually, two locations we tried to get a recording at. My cousin has the one recording. I don't believe we have the other recording because it took place on one of those old I think it was an iPod Nano, the little tiny cube ones that they didn't have a screen. They just had a way to record and all that. It was old technology, but I'll see if we can find some of that stuff, see if there's some interest in it. And like I said, kind of see what interest there is in understanding my family stories. See if people want to hear more of my stories. Because again, these were a couple of my least scary stories. I wanted to see what interest there is. And for the more scarier stuff, I want to have others there that experience it so we can fully dive in and talk about the topic. So again, if you're interested, go ahead and subscribe, like this video, give me any hints, tips, tricks, let me know what you think, tell me if I suck. I'll take any advice you got. This probably wasn't the greatest first introduction video. I'm going to try and improve from here, see what people would like. So let me know what you think. Take care, everyone.